Roger Wright. Welcome to another episode of Glory on Grandview. Well, it is the end of the college football season, and no surprise, the Mount Union Purple Raiders just contended for what would have been their 14th national championship. They fell a little short this year, but we did have some Wadsworth Grizzlies on that team. Jazz Jackson, Mason McMillan, Ben Lilly, Mason Fortner, and Trey Schaefer all represented the Wadsworth Grizzlies. They did fall a little short in the championship game, but another outstanding season. Very proud of our Grizzlies. But my guest today knows a little something about national championships at Mount Union, and I am very pleased to have my guest, my friend, Jason Knapp. Jason, welcome to Glory on Grandview.
Thank you. I appreciate what you do here. This is a great show.
All right, so let's jump into it. You were a Wadsworth Grizzly through and through from the start, and like many of our Wadsworth Grizzly football players, you started off with some neighborhood football, really. So I know Highland Circle was the big meeting spot back in the day for you guys. Little backyard football there with the neighborhood guys.
Yeah.
And then you went into youth football. Mm-hmm. So I know you had a great experience with youth football. So talk a little bit about that, maybe.
Well, I don't know if my parents understood when they bought their house, that circle out there would be, where, we all would play, and we played everything there, right? But definitely football, and we were really lucky to grow up in, I think, one of the better neighborhoods in Wadsworth. But as you know, youth football in Wadsworth was based on neighborhoods back then. Of course, you had the Browns, which I played for, was that part of Wadsworth, and you had the Black Panthers in a different area of Wadsworth, the Redskins on the other side of town, which created great rivalries. But of course, we had elementary schools that are also neighborhood based. So, I know we don't do it that way anymore, and we're all one now, which is great. But those rivalries were fun, and everybody could ride their bike to practice. And I remember, getting on my bike, throwing my football helmet on the handlebars, and heading down to Durling Park to practice for the Browns.
And I know we got a picture there of youth football, and I know you mentioned your coaches in youth football. Who'd you have? Mosier and Flath.
Well, it's amazing. You remember all your football coaches, right? From Howdy Hill to Tim Flath and Rick Mosier, and then later John Mosier helped out for a long time, and Mr. Montoni, and and a lot of them coached too, even after their kids were gone, which is a tribute to them, how much they cared, and that has really continued. Wadsworth Youth Football is a big part of our success here.
It is. So you play in neighborhood sports a lot, and then you had a family background. It's very interesting. Mm-hmm. You had a family background here, starting with your grandfather. Yeah. You want to talk a little bit about Art there and his accomplishments?
Yeah. Now that would be, of course, my mother, Jane. Art yet. What you see there, Jeanette, Pennsylvania, but ended up going to the Penn State University.
The Nittany Lion.
The Nittany Lion, right, and having success there, and a little halfback. Also play a little bit of defensive back.
I think some of those genes must have come through for you a little bit there.
Yeah.
And your brother Jeff. Jeff played for us, great offensive lineman for some good Grizzly teams there, big brother.
Graduated with 3 years before me, more 90, 91. But this in football. I mean, you had a brother who played, and you always need somebody to look up to, and he and his friends, and just really set the tone. And of course, I had to compete with them at the circle.
That's right.
Being the younger, brother of Jeff.
All right, and then your parents, Jack and Jane, just wonderful people. Mm-hmm. Always around, always supportive.
Yeah, no question about it. And later, I never would have been able to go to Mount Union College if my parents weren't there to foot the bill. But not only that, they loved it. They were there every game, traveled everywhere. But that was true even in, youth football and middle school to high school. My parents are great football fans. Yeah,
they are, and great people. All right, so youth football back then. You mentioned there's the picture of the Browns, the rivalries. I love that. When I first came to Wadsworth, you guys were in 7th grade, and I remember that. I'd always hear your chatter on the bus. We coach basketball, and you guys would be talking about the rivalries, the Browns and the Panthers, and all that fun stuff. But, Then you know going into middle school, and you had Coach Thompson and Coach Trebet there, and you had some fun teams there. That was 8th grade, I think, when you guys started.
Yeah, there weren't 2 teams. You could play as a 7th grader, but it was mostly 8th. And we had a really good team. We had 1 loss. I was actually just talking to Coach Thompson about it not too long ago. He still thinks about that 1 loss.
It's killing him.
But,
it's gnawing at him.
A really, really good team. And we practiced right there across the road there from old CIS in that little alley. And I always remember that. Coach Trebet, of course, as you know, Hall of Fame coach, more on the side of track. But he could coach some quarterbacks. No question. So, yeah, they were great.
Yeah, a lot of fun. So then you guys got up to high school, and then, talk about your high school experience. You had Coach Jones at the beginning. Here's your 93 picture there, your senior picture. But talk about once you became a Grizzly.
Well, I started out, obviously on the freshman team, and, my coaches were Rick Miller and Kirk Cresawati. How these coaches continued to coach, too. I mean, John Thompson, middle school, moved up with us to coach varsity, and Kirk Cresawati had been the head coach for the freshman team for a long time after this. We had another undefeated season here. And then, of course, on to JV. I can remember Tom Bowers and was our JV coach. And then my sophomore year was Ron Jones. That would have been Ron's last year. Okay, we won the league that year in miraculous fashion, actually, on a botched field goal. And I still remember Rod Lovelace, our quarterback, running around and threw it in the end zone to win it. We beat Revere. But then Ron stepped down, and then I had Ramsey Shepard as my head coach my junior year and my senior year. Yeah.
So and I remember those years well, and the pictures there and the excitement. You were a star halfback for us. We ran the wing T. We had some good running backs, and we just showed the picture of your fellow seniors there. I saw Joe Horvath's picture there, Brian Madigan, and with Shane Robinson. We had some really good running backs on that team, and some good linemen, and just a great senior class there. But the junior year did not go so well. That was Coach Shepard's first year, but his second year, that's where you just saw the clipping there. Sure. The Suburban League champions. It's great memories of that group, of that team. Maybe some memories of that year.
Well, we went 8-2, right? We lost to Cloverleaf week 1 in a tough game, 3-0, back when defense was still really important, I guess, right? But we ended up losing to Green, but of course they had lost to somebody else, so we tied for the league. We were very close to making the playoffs. In those days, only 4 teams made the playoffs, so we just missed it with that loss to Green. But we shared the title that year.
Yeah, and I remember great defense. And one of the things I remember about that team, and I'd like you to comment on this, and again, all the years that I coached, team chemistry is, as you know, is really something. It's hard to create. You guys always had it. Your group was one of the most fun groups to coach. And I think, to listen to you guys, my memories of that, you guys were always laughing, joking around. You genuinely liked each other. You had played sports since, when you were in elementary school in Highland Circle.
Sure.
You guys loved sports. You loved to compete. And you just had some really solid guys on that team. So talk maybe about your
Well, I think that's
class.
really important to win. You have to have people that you have a really close bond with, right? And not only that, I think you need personality. I think when you have a really successful team, you have a lot of leadership. And no, we had a ball, but we loved our coaching staff too. As you know, you were part of this, and we had a lot of coaches with personality. So you're right, it was just a really good mix.
Yeah, well, some of the things I remember, you guys, one of the things you did so well, you were very hard workers, and you mentioned your leadership. You guys had some great team leaders on that team that really helped the coaches. But I remember things like, I remember when we would run at the end of practice, what would we call them, beast?
Yes.
When you had to run the sides of the field, you had to run, touch, run back, and do the whole width of the field.
Of course, it's timed.
And it was timed. It all had to be under a certain time, or we would repeat. And one memory I have of you, I loved it. I remember one time I was standing on the far side, making sure everybody touched the line.
Yeah.
and it was hot. It was at the end of practice, and you were leading the pack. You were running hard, and I heard you talking to yourself, and you said, "Walk in the park." Walk in the park. That's what you were telling. I loved it.
Sure.
And then you were sprinting, leading the way, and I loved that.
That was probably to get me through it, right?
Sure.
Positive talk.
I'm sure at that moment you were doing, but I loved it because you had that mentality, and your fellow seniors had that mentality, and that's what enabled you guys to go 8-2.
Yeah.
You know,
and we had to be in shape because a lot of us did go both ways. So you look back on that conditioning, and now I understand why we did it. No question.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of you guys did go both ways on that team, and it was just a credit to you. So very successful season. I think Coach Shepard was the coach of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really a great season there. One of the other highlights I do have to mention because I do remember it in my mind. We were playing Norton in a very tough game, a very good Norton team. Ronnie Messner, remember, running back, Travis Dobbins, linebacker, they were loaded. And very close game, and you ripped off a Barry Sander-esque like run, and it broke their backs. And so talk about the run, come on.
Well, it was fourth down, and I guess most people would think they're going to throw the football, right? It's fourth down, and it was fourth, and there was some yards there. I think maybe 8 or 9. And of course, we ran the wing tee, so you don't really throw a lot. And we just ran this sweep, and I ran it. I still remember into the boundary, and of course, there's nothing there. So I had reverse field and took it all the way back, to the wide side, and got the first down. We eventually then drove the football and won the game. But that was for the victory bell. I mean, remember that Norton-Wadsworth rivalry was real. And you knew Norton kids right down the road, and we knew all those kids, and they were a good team. They really were, but winning the victory bell was special.
Yeah, it was, and that rivalry, I know it's kind of gone away since, but that rivalry was a lot of fun, for many, many years, and the victory bell was a big deal, and we took it home that night. All right, so after the season, your senior season, you were a multi-sport athlete. You played basketball. You had some injuries. You're in, through football and then in basketball. And you were, all league, all county, everything. And I remember talking to you about, hey, what are your plans? Do you want to play in college? And you kind of thought things over. And, what was your thought process at the end of the season?
I had a knee surgery late after that basketball season. So I was rehabbing, through the spring. And that's usually when recruiting happens. And, I was getting calls from Division III football schools. And I considered it, but I decided, not to do it. And went down to Ohio U my freshman year, and Ohio U, of course, a great place. Things went well. I had great friends. Went with some people from Wadsworth, but I can just remember walking to class and just kind of having that epiphany, if you will. Whether I was seeing football players that played for Ohio U, and I just knew that this wasn't going to be enough. And I also kind of figured out, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a coach. That's what I wanted to do. Be a history teacher and coach. So therefore, let's call some people back and see if I can get back and play some Division III football.
All right. So when you thought you had those thoughts, your old neighbor, the Garns, Mike Garn had started Mount Union before Mount Union really was a powerhouse.
Right.
But then Joe Garn, his dad, was heavily involved with Mount Union. And so talk about that connection.
It's such an interesting connection because Mike Garn was my neighbor across the street at Highland, at the Highland Circle there. And I can remember growing up watching Mike work out, and he was a tremendous worker. There's Joe there, and when I was at Mount, and watching Mike, and of course Mike became a great running back here at Wadsworth, had some records for a while. Went on and was a two-way player at Mount Union. And really right there at the turn of Mount Union becoming really successful. So I think he was important to that. So Joe, of course, recruited me to go there. Of course, Joe got involved at Mount Union right as I graduated. So he, of course, is who I called. And he took me right up there and, of course, met Coach Karras. And even then, Coach Karras was kind of like meeting the President of the United States. He just had that presence to him. And then, of course, our defensive coordinator, Don Montgomery, I sat in his office, and just the intensity in his eyes and just the intensity of the whole place, I knew this is where I had to be.
Yeah.
There was no
Had
question.
they recruited you out of high school?
They did. They did. So more as maybe a special team returner, punt returner, kick returner, not offense, probably going to play defense. So I ended up playing, obviously defensive back.
All right. So you go to Mount Union, Larry Karras and Don Montgomery, and it was really when they were starting to take off. Mm-hmm. Now, they had it going on. They had been there a while. Great players, legacy like Mike Garn, but then it was really growing into something big.
Yeah.
So you kind of hit it at the right time.
Yeah.
So freshman, you go ahead, talk us through your seasons then and your time at Mount.
When I showed up there, they'd already won one national title in 1993. Jim Ballard, really good team. So that was the first national championship. Then they didn't win in 94 or 95. So I showed up in 95. We made it to the semis, the Final Four. So, the sophomore year became big, 96, could we get back? And we did. And, who would have thought then from there we would win again in 97 and again in 98. I think a lot of special players showed up at the same time. I've always told people this. I was the right, it was the right place at the right time. There's a lot of things in life that are timing and luck. But also, I think Coach Karras had this vision in mind of what Mount Union was going to become.
Yeah, and it became it.
Yeah.
Think of that. Quite amazing there. But, some of the things that you saw at Mount that may be separated. What made Mount Union special then? What set it apart to the level that it got set apart?
I think one of the ideas that Coach Karras had is I'm not going to cut anybody. So you saw our team pictures, we got 100 freshmen showing up. So the competition, even though it's Division III, the competition to win a spot or maybe even just dress for a home game or let alone dress for an away game.
To travel,
right, to make the travel team or to make the playoff roster, right? There's all of these obstacles, right, that you had to get over and achieve, and competition does that, I think. It breeds a lot of success.
Yeah, those team pictures are mine. There are a ton of players in those team pictures, so a lot of competition, and credit to you. You got on some special teams your first year, right, and then by your second year, your starter at corner and really played well. Yeah. Remember watching you one of the national championship games. You had an interception. Yeah. I think you were on ESPN. Right. I was all pumped to see you out there, and then you made a big play there in the national championship. So this is a question I've never got to ask one of my guests, and I'm excited to ask you. What's it like the night before a national championship game?
Well, it's a fun week. You get down there midweek. They have a lot of things planned, speakers, really good speakers.
Who'd you see?
Bill Curry spoke, who was just a fantastic
Who was he,
speaker.
at Alabama at that time?
I think he had just left Alabama, but he gave one of the greatest speeches. Me and my parents talk about it all the time. But there's a lot of meetings with just the team. The coaches would leave. I'll never forget that in those hotel, ballrooms, and our leaders would get up and talk about it. And for us, it was like a Division I BCS game.
National championship.
I think anybody who wins a championship knows how hard it is, no matter at what level it is. And the fact that we did it 3 times undefeated, I look back on that and. I don't know if it was all luck sometimes. Sometimes you gotta have some luck there. The ball's got to bounce the right way. But at the end of the day, we had some really, really good players.
Yeah, and I remember seeing the teams that you guys were playing. They were rowing twice, right? And they were loaded. Where were that? New Jersey?
Sure.
They were loaded, and then all the lacrosse or like was it Lycoming was the other one. There was some great, and just having watched the last national champion where the Raiders lost, the talent is really impressive.
Yeah, we played some really good teams, and a school like Rowan was much bigger than Mount Union. Mount Union at that time, I'll never forget, our enrollment was 1,800 kids at Mount Union. You roll in and play a Rowan who is maybe around 8,000 kids, right? So yeah, you're right. And I think some of the schools too, a lot of junior college transfers, and you look back on some of those teams, there's some NFL players that were out there that eventually played in the NFL.
Yeah.
So yeah, some great teams.
Yeah, and I remember that Rowan especially had a lot of Division I transfer players on there.
Sure.
All right, what was it like playing for Larry Karras? He's a legend, the things he's done.
Yeah.
I know he's still involved some in Mount Union, and will be probably till he dies. But what was it like playing for Larry?
Well, I think what I've learned about Coach Karras is that all T's are crossed, right? Right, all your I's are dotted. I mean, the preparation, the discipline of every day, right? I think we all know football is routine, but our routine was to the T. And I think one of the great things that he always instilled in us is that there was never a sense of entitlement at Mount Union. No matter how much we won, we still just got a T-shirt and some sanitary shorts at the beginning of the year, right? And Division III is special that way, though. Right? There are no scholarships, and kids are there because they love football. But he had, I think, also put together a great staff too.
Yeah. So from Mount Union, then you got to experience those 3 national championships, 3 rings, and then, as you said, you had made the decision you were going to go into teaching and coaching there. So take us from there. You graduate, and then. I know the story, but go ahead.
I mean, I thought I would maybe move away from Wadsworth and maybe find another, place to teach. But at that time, Ron Jones was a principal, and we had talked, and miraculously 3 social studies jobs came open, and me and Brian Madigan, who I played with. We get hired in here as social studies teachers, and at the end of the day, it's kind of a dream come true to come back. And I immediately started coaching for Greg Dennison. I coached freshman football for 2 years with Kirk Creswati and Mike Winkler. Of course, Mike Winkler also coached back when I was in high school as well. So it was fun to do that, and then I got on staff with Greg.
So, and then you coached, Wadsworth for a few years. But you kind of had an itch, I think, to see what's it like to, be outside of Wadsworth. So you had an opportunity in Massillon.
Yeah, well, again, this is my Mount Union connection. My good friend Jason Hall, who was our All-American linebacker at Mount Union, he had just got the job at Massillon. He asked me to come out and coach. So I thought it would be an excellent opportunity. I was also looking to move on in the profession, become a coordinator, learn some new systems, which I did. And then from there, I did go on and got a coordinating job at Kenmore, and eventually became the head football coach at Kenmore. And then wound up back here under Coach Todd.
Okay, so another Mount Union connection there where Coach Todd came in and became the head coach of the Wadsworth Grizzlies. Had you known Coach Todd at all before?
I didn't. Coach Todd is a little bit younger than me. Came in after me, but also highly recruited by Joe Garn, which is interesting. And so, no, it's been a great fit because even though we didn't know each other, we do, right? Because we both played at Mount Union, and we have a lot of the same beliefs that we learned there.
Yeah. So you as defensive coordinator, Justin as head coach. But what are some of the things, like when you think of our football program now, Wadsworth Grizzly football, what are some key elements maybe you see coming from Mount Union? Like like how you guys do the things reminds you of your background?
Well, I think Coach Todd and myself, we talk about that a lot. We always draw back to what we did at Mount Union. And I think that idea that, nothing's given, right? I mean, there's no sense of entitlement, right? It's always about the work. And that's one thing I think that probably built Mount Union into the dynasty it was. They were willing to outwork other Division III programs, be ahead of what other programs are doing. And I think Coach Todd is as progressive as it comes to building that kind of culture.
Yeah. Well, we've had some other Grizzlies. Rob Sondels was a standout player for Mount Union. Austin White, a little more recently, went on to star there. But watching this year, were you especially proud when you saw those Grizzlies out there, players
great.
that you had coached?
Definitely, yeah. That's that's a dream come true for a lot of us. Of course, we'd like our players to play college football anywhere, right? But to see them out there again competing for a national title this year, we're very proud of what they've done, and they were just great players here, so we're not surprised.
Yeah, and so, you know, wrapping up, you know, your family now, wonderful wife Carrie, your daughters, everybody, but you know, just so neat to see, you know, your involvement in Grizzly football. I mean, I don't know how many years that is, but that's a lot of years involved with Grizzly football, and it you know, was certainly fun to watch you as a player perform. It was fun to coach with you, and now it's fun to watch you coach our young men in here in Wadsworth there. So Jason, I want to thank you for being on Glory on Grandview, my friend, and thank you for sharing your story about Grizzly football and Mount Union. So join me again for the next episode of Glory on Grandview.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.